You didn't agree to it. You didn't sign a contract. Yet somewhere along the way, your thoughts stopped being yours. You scroll, you nod, you agree, but if someone asked why you believe what you do, you'd have no answer. Because you didn't choose it. It was chosen for you. That's the power code, the silent psychological architecture buried under your perception, built by those who understand how to program the human mind. You think you're deciding. You're not. You're reacting to stimuli designed to bypass your logic and attack your emotional circuits. That's not a conspiracy. It's psychology at its most weaponized form. The scene of control. Imagine this. You walk into a meeting. Someone greets you warmly, mirrors your body language, subtly nods when you talk. You feel safe, understood. By the time you leave, you've agreed to something you didn't plan to. You think it's trust. It's not. It's calibration, a manipulation technique Machiavelli would have called the art of wearing another man's skin. Niccolò Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that men are driven by two principal impulses, love and fear. Modern manipulators upgraded this. They don't need to make you love or fear them, they just need to make you feel seen. Once they do, they own your emotional frequency. And once they control that frequency, you'll bend without ever realizing it. The hidden architecture. The power code begins where attention meets emotion. It's not just what people say, it's how they say it, when they say it, and what they make you feel while saying it. A manipulator doesn't argue facts. They rewrite frames. They don't fight your logic. They make your logic irrelevant. Psychologists call this framing dominance. Machiavelli called it control through perception. When a master manipulator enters your psychological space, they don't fight your beliefs head-on. They simply alter the walls of the room until your own thoughts start to echo their voice. You've seen it in politicians. You've seen it in relationships. You've seen it in influencers who convince millions that self-destruction is self-expression. And every time, the code repeats the same formula. Emotion first. Logic later. Control forever. The code of rewiring. Dark psychology doesn't conquer through aggression. It infects through repetition. Repetition is the neural Trojan horse. When you hear the same phrase, tone, or image enough times, your brain begins to associate it with safety. Once that link is built, your resistance collapses. That's how propaganda works. That's how cults are built. And that's how one manipulative person can make you question your reality while convincing you it's your fault. Machiavelli warned that he who controls appearances controls the people. He understood something centuries ago that modern neuroscience later proved. Your brain cannot distinguish between truth and emotional consistency. So when someone makes you feel something enough times, anger, guilt, shame, belonging, your neurons rewire to protect that emotional loop. That's the power code in action. Not hypnosis. Not magic. Conditioning. A quiet, invisible edit of your inner operating system. The emotional trap. The first stage of control is attention. But attention alone is not enough. It needs a hook, a crack in your psychological armor. And the easiest crack is emotionally unmet need. The manipulator doesn't attack your strength. They mirror your emptiness. They study your silence, your pauses, your insecurities, and then they reflect them back, wrapped in validation. That's how they hook you. Not through threats. Through comfort. It's Machiavellian mercy, compassion used as a weapon. When someone gives you what you've been starved of, attention, validation, understanding, your defenses collapse. And the moment you depend on that emotional supply, they own your behavioral patterns. They don't even have to tell you what to do. They just withdraw what you crave. Your mind does the rest. You self-correct for them. The paradox of control. You think control feels like domination. It doesn't. It feels like alignment. That's the cruelest truth of dark psychology. When it's done right, you don't feel controlled, you feel understood. That's why the power code is so effective. It doesn't demand submission, it makes obedience feel voluntary. It's what Machiavelli meant when he wrote that the promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. Control is never about rules, it's about emotional leverage. And emotional leverage is invisible. You'll never see the strings. You'll only feel your thoughts slowly aligning with someone else's rhythm, and think it was your idea all along. The modern code. Today, the power code doesn't just live in thrones or war rooms. It lives in algorithms. In social media feeds engineered to reward outrage, envy, and fear, the three emotional currencies of control. Every swipe teaches your brain what to desire, what to hate, what to crave, and most dangerously, what to compare. You think you're scrolling through random content. You're not. You're participating in a psychological ritual, reinforcement learning wrapped in entertainment. A modern prince doesn't wear a crown. He wears an interface. Dark psychology has evolved, but the blueprint hasn't changed since the Renaissance. Manipulate perception, reward compliance, punish defiance. That's how kingdoms were built then. And that's how attention empires are built now. Closing the first gate. So, if you've ever wondered why you say yes when you meant no, why you feel anxious when you should feel free, or why you keep chasing validation from people who give you nothing back, that's not weakness. That's conditioning. The power code is ancient. It's beautiful in its design and terrifying in its precision. And in the next part, you'll see how those who master it, rulers, manipulators, influencers, even lovers, use it to reshape entire realities. Because once someone learns how to rewrite emotions, they no longer need to control your body. They only need to own your perception. You've seen the trap. Now you'll see the operators, the ones who don't just use the power code, but become it. They move through the world like silent architects, shaping outcomes, conversations, even entire ideologies, without ever appearing to be in control. Because the moment you notice the manipulation, the spell breaks. So, the true masters hide behind plausible innocence. Machiavelli once wrote, "A wise ruler ought never to keep faith when it is against his interest." He didn't mean treachery for its own sake. He meant flexibility of morality, the ability to bend truth until it becomes a weapon of influence. And in the modern world, that weapon is polished to perfection. The anatomy of psychological control. To understand how the power code truly operates, you must accept one brutal truth. Most people are predictable machines of emotion. They crave approval, fear rejection, seek belonging, and will unconsciously trade autonomy for comfort. That's not weakness. That's the design flaw of the human brain. The manipulator simply learns the pattern, times the reward, and rewrites the code. A power coder follows three unspoken laws. Control the frame, and you control reality. Never argue on someone else's terms. Shift definitions, change the battlefield, make their logic irrelevant. A master manipulator never defends, they redefine. You say, "You're being unfair." They reply, "I'm just being honest." Now you're defending morality, while they control the meaning. Control the emotion, and you control time. A manipulator doesn't rush. They pace your emotions like a metronome. Excitement, guilt, silence, validation, repeat. Like dopamine conditioning, each cycle makes you hungrier for their approval. You'll start chasing their next response the way addicts chase their next hit. Control the story, and you control identity. The final form of manipulation isn't external. It's when they rewrite who you think you are. They plant narratives. "You're too emotional." "You're lucky I tolerate you." "Without me, you'd fall apart." Slowly, your self-concept bends to match their design, until rebellion feels like suicide. That's not exaggeration. It's emotional reprogramming, dark psychology in its purest form. The Machiavellian blueprint. Machiavelli understood that fear and loyalty are two sides of the same coin. He wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." But the modern manipulator evolved that idea. They don't need your fear. They just need you to fear losing them. This is psychological tyranny disguised as intimacy. Whether it's a relationship, a political movement, or an ideology, the mechanism is identical. Attach emotion to control. Make withdrawal feel like death. Then, sit back and let the victim chain themselves. He called it necessity. In his world, power was survival. In ours, it's attention. And attention is the new oxygen of influence. Whoever controls what people look at, controls what they think about. And whoever controls that, controls the future. The master code in action. Let's dissect how this looks in modern life. Example 1. The corporate manipulator. Your boss praises you excessively before dropping a request. You're the only one I trust with this. That's ego manipulation. He's feeding your need for significance, turning your pride into his leash. You'll stay late, work harder, burn out, just to keep earning that hit of approval. You think it's loyalty. It's addiction disguised as purpose. Example 2. The social charmer. They mirror your language, match your energy, and feed you micro-validations. I totally get what you mean. They build emotional debt through resonance. Then one day, they flip, go cold, withdrawn, unresponsive. Now you chase. They've flipped the polarity of control. You gave it willingly, because your brain associates their attention with your worth. Example 3. The ideological architect. Every movement needs a savior, a villain, and a cause. Manipulators exploit this trinity. They weaponize moral outrage, crafting a narrative that divides people into believers and enemies. Once you're emotionally invested, logic dies. You'll defend the ideology even against evidence, because leaving it means losing identity. That's not just manipulation. That's neural capture. Neural capture, the invisible prison. Dark psychology thrives on neural capture, when your mind's defense systems are hijacked by emotional narratives. It's the same mechanism cults use to recruit. Same structure corporations use to market. Same instinct narcissists use to dominate. It starts as curiosity, becomes engagement, then dependency. Once your dopamine circuits start firing for their validation, you're no longer in dialogue. You're in submission. You stop evaluating the message, you start protecting the messenger. And the deeper you defend them, the tighter the psychological cage becomes. Machiavelli foresaw this. He wrote, "The promise of safety makes men slaves." The modern version is digital. We scroll because we want connection, but end up obeying algorithms that train our nervous systems like Pavlov's dogs. The new prince isn't flesh and blood, it's code. The power code. When power becomes religion, every manipulative system eventually becomes faith. Not spiritual faith, psychological devotion. You stop questioning, because questioning feels like betrayal. You stop seeing contradictions because cognitive dissonance hurts too much. So, the mind creates harmony by rewriting reality. That's the apex of dark psychology, when lies become self-sustaining. When you defend your captor because they make you feel safe. Think about it. Why do people stay in toxic relationships? Why do nations obey corrupt leaders? Why do crowds worship false idols of charisma? Because emotion trumps evidence. Because pain avoided feels better than truth accepted. Because the power code rewires not what you know, but what you feel to be true. The predator's advantage. The manipulator doesn't need to be brilliant. They just need to be emotionally fluent. They read micro-expressions, tones, silences, and then tailor their narrative like a surgeon. To the untrained eye, it looks like empathy. To the trained, it's predation. They can make you laugh while eroding your confidence. Make you confess while thinking you're bonding. Make you obey while believing you're free. And when they're done, they'll leave you hollow, unsure of your own mind, wondering how you lost yourself so quietly. That's because they didn't fight you. They became you. The master's mask. Machiavelli advised rulers to appear virtuous, even when they are not. Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand. The master manipulator wears empathy like armor. They appear moral, humble, misunderstood, even victimized. Because guilt disarms suspicion. They understand that image is stronger than truth. That's why propaganda always paints the villain as a martyr. Because the human brain protects innocence more fiercely than it pursues accuracy. That's the real power of the code. It doesn't force you to believe, it makes you want to believe. The unseen battlefield. So, where does that leave you? Every conversation, every relationship, every interaction is a battlefield of subtle dominance. Most people fight unconsciously, losing without realizing it. The power code operates quietly, elegantly, like smoke filling a room. And before you know it, the air you breathe no longer belongs to you. The manipulators aren't magicians. They're engineers. They exploit how easily human beings trade freedom for comfort. And until you learn to see the code, you'll keep mistaking control for connection. You've seen how the code infects, how it rewires behavior, reshapes identity, and masquerades as love, loyalty, or leadership. But here's the question that matters most. Can you escape it? But not by fighting harder. You escape by seeing deeper. Because once you can see the mechanism, you're no longer inside it. A puppet that sees the strings is no longer a puppet. The psychology of awareness. Your defense begins with awareness, not intellect. Smart people fall for manipulation every day. Because manipulation doesn't target intelligence. It targets emotion. You can't outthink what you don't feel. And you can't defend against what you refuse to see. The power code thrives in blindness, in your desire to assume good intentions. That's why your empathy is the manipulator's favorite weapon. They use your humanity against you. They don't overpower you, they borrow your virtue to disguise their control. That's why the first step is brutal. You must be willing to see evil dressed as kindness, to see charm as camouflage, to see validation as a leash. It's uncomfortable, but truth always is. Machiavelli said, the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. Look at your circle, who drains you, who rewires you, who makes you doubt your own mind. Those are not friends. Those are coders. How they rewire your mind, and how to undo it. To break the power code, you have to reverse engineer it. That means understanding 3 layers of psychological control, and burning each one down. Layer 1. Emotional hijack. This is the foundation. They capture your feelings. You'll notice a pattern, extreme highs followed by silence or disapproval. It's the reward-withdrawal loop. They teach your nervous system to crave their reaction the way a gambler craves the next win. Countermeasure. Emotional regulation. Learn to pause. When you feel the urge to react, breathe. Observe the feeling without feeding it. When you stop rewarding their trigger, the loop collapses. Control returns to you, not because they stopped manipulating, but because you stopped responding. That's the paradox. You win not by resisting harder, but by refusing to play. Layer 2. Cognitive framing. Here, they rewrite meaning. They say things like, "You're too sensitive. I was just joking. Everyone else agrees with me." It's linguistic gaslighting, bending perception until reality itself becomes negotiable. You start doubting your memory, then your judgment, then your worth. Countermeasure. Language awareness. Write things down. Document contradictions. Force their words into the light of paper. Manipulation dies under documentation because it relies on fluid memory. When reality becomes fixed, control shatters. Machiavelli warned rulers to avoid being hated. Because hatred clarifies vision. When you stop adoring the manipulator, you start seeing them. Layer 3. Identity capture. The most dangerous level, when they convince you that your survival depends on them. This is the cult dynamic. They isolate you emotionally, then feed you meaning, until your entire sense of self becomes entangled with their approval. Countermeasure. Identity separation. Ask yourself, who was I before I met them? Who am I when they're not in the room? Write the answers down. That's your original code, the one they buried. Rebuild it piece by piece, like restoring an old cathedral from the ashes. The Machiavellian reversal. Machiavelli's The Prince wasn't a manual for tyranny. It was a warning disguised as instruction. He didn't create the code, he exposed it. He said, "Men are so simple and so much creatures of circumstance that the deceiver will always find someone ready to be deceived." But he also implied the opposite. He who understands deception becomes immune to it. So learn from the prince. Learn to see through appearances. Learn that morality without awareness is just vulnerability dressed as virtue. Power is not evil, ignorance of power is. Because the world doesn't reward innocence. It consumes it. The defense protocol. How to stay free. Detach emotion from outcome. The manipulator thrives on your emotional investment. Stop needing closure, validation, or approval from them. Indifference is your shield. Recognize power games early. If someone rushes intimacy, plays victim, or constantly reframes your reality, take note. The first red flag is urgency. Real connection is slow. Manipulation is fast. Master the pause. The moment you pause before reacting, you break the cycle. Every second of silence is a glitch in their control system. It disarms the predator. Rebuild self-authority. Spend time alone, not in isolation, but in recalibration. You cannot be controlled by what you fully understand within yourself. A stable self-image is immune to suggestion. Learn their language. Read psychology. Study rhetoric. Learn persuasion, not to use it, but to recognize it. Knowledge transforms fear into clarity. Once you speak their language, manipulation becomes visible like invisible ink under light. The final revelation. The power code isn't inherently evil. It's neutral, a tool. Like fire. It can warm civilizations or burn them to ash. The same psychological mechanics that destroy trust can also build it, if used with integrity. The difference lies in intent. Machiavelli's shadow looms over every boardroom, every campaign, every relationship where power hides behind charm. But maybe he was right about one thing. He who becomes master of fear becomes master of himself. When you master your fear of rejection, of loss, of disapproval, you stop being programmable. You become unpredictable. And in a world built on psychological control, unpredictability is freedom. The closing monologue. So the next time someone flatters you too quickly, questions your sanity too subtly, or pulls you closer while cutting your confidence in half, remember this. You're not crazy. You're in a psychological arena designed to test your awareness. You can't win by fighting their game. You win by seeing the game. Because once you see it, you're no longer prey. You become observer, analyst, sovereign. And sovereignty, over your own mind, is the only real power that's left.